has become a normality, I would always thank Almighty God for blessing me with an opportunity like this one to account for my stewardship as the minister with responsibility for public infrastructure, post-urban development, and transport. And in the process as well, Mr. Speaker, I always find it imperative to thank my employers from St. Christopher I, who continue to repose their confidence in me, Mr. Speaker. And I want to implore them not to be fooled by those who make useless noises. As I always say, you know me, and I know you. I want to apologize quickly as well, Mr. Speaker, for not being able to convene my normal Thursday constituency consultations at my constituency office due to my call to duty in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I would like to address just two of my many subjects. So, to wit, public infrastructure and transport. And I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that the undisputable fact is that we as a Team Unity administration inherited a country with a crumbling public infrastructure. Our roads, and they bear repeating, Mr. Speaker, because some people seem to have a 3-day syndrome. They forget after 3 days. But our roads, Mr. Speaker, our public buildings, these we inherited in a state of dilapidation, for want of a word, Mr. Speaker. Road maintenance and road resurfacing, they were left to what I call political expediency. We always knew when an election was due under a Labour Party. Big road contract for $25 million, lump sum contracts as that. No bills of quantities. You see a lump sum amount for $15 million for material, 10 for labor. We don't question the labor, although we can, but materials, one lump sum figure for $15 million, signed at most times by the member who is absent, the member from number 6. He signed those contracts. But Mr. Speaker, we are not of that ilk. As a matter of fact, as I speak, we are undertaking a road condition survey that would tell us, would analyze, Mr. Speaker, the condition in which our roads are, our Island Main Road and our secondary roads. Almost 200 miles stretch of roads if you combine or you accumulate both sets of roads. Mr. Speaker, when you look, Mr. Speaker, at our contract, as my colleague before me intimated, our contract with the people, our manifesto. If you look on page 41, Mr. Speaker, you will see capital projects, and it states quite clearly, a team unity government commits to the following projects within its term of office. An East Bus Line terminal. And what is happening, Mr. Speaker, as our revered leader and member from number 7 would say, promise made, promise kept. Because the prefab structure for that terminal building that would facilitate the relocation of the Public Works Vehicle Maintenance Division is due here late next month or early in September. As I speak, the terminal construction component is already out to tender, if you read the journals and the media. An all-weather Mondo surface athletic track in Nevis, that is almost complete. That is what we committed to, Mr. Speaker. Promise made, promise kept. A new modern Bastia High School. How could we forget, Mr. Speaker? That is what we committed to, and that is what's going on. We spoke to the feasibility study toward the construction of a bridge joining St. Kitts and Nevis. That is, as I speak before the cabinet, Mr. Speaker, waiting for an input from our colleagues, our partners in Nevis, Mr. Speaker. And that I'm sure will come sooner rather than later. We spoke as well, Mr. Speaker, to geothermal and the Old Road Bay project. The study has begun to determine how and what we'll do across Old Road Bay that has been left there unattended for over 20 years of a failed administration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I get emotional when it comes to that, Mr. Speaker, because I am aware of someone from my constituency, a young Molly who died because of a rock that fell onto his car one Sunday afternoon. They did nothing about it, but we are doing something about that, Mr. Speaker. And during this term of office, this administration will ensure that all the danger across Old Road Bay is eliminated once and for all. Mr. Speaker, I am aware that the project profiles have been sent to the relevant ministry, and I implore them to accept the best estimates available so that we can get our allocations in the budget estimates for 2018, because we are not going to wait until 2020. I don't know if that's the time for elections, member from 7? Constitutionally. We're not going to wait until that time to implement our projects. We want all these done before that. Mr. Speaker, when we look at our infrastructure, we refer to our air and our seaports, Mr. Speaker. I mean, when you look at the fiscal performance or the financial performance of SCASPA, you will glean from those financial statements that in 2010, they got out of the red, and net income was about just over $500,000. It went up in 2011 to, I think, about $8 million. And our unaudited statements to date, we anticipate a net income of over $11 million. But what has happened, in my view, Mr. Speaker, and I say so respectfully, is that the former board of directors in SCASPA sacrificed the assets of SCASPA. They failed to maintain those assets, equipment, buildings. The airport runway, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of having a colorful looking balance sheet. Because, Mr. Speaker, we also inherited a runway at the Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw International Airport in poor condition, very poor condition. And what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, we are embarking upon the resurfacing of that airport runway and 2 taxiways, Charlie and Bravo, at an estimated cost of $18 million, Mr. Speaker. $18 million. So all those profits could have been put back into R&D, development of the port, maintenance of the port over the years. And that's what they left us. No wonder the people fired them on that fateful day in February 2015. We also, Mr. Speaker, are considering a phase 2, which will address the resurfacing of our taxiway Alpha, which is the longest and most important taxiway. But that in itself, Mr. Speaker, estimates would put it in terms of our rehabilitation costs, our reparation costs, way in excess of $10 million. But this is what we inherited in terms of our crumbling infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, bids are currently being invited, or tenders are currently being invited for taxiway Alpha, because, as I said, it's the main one and the most important one, especially when we have to accommodate aircraft like the BA 777s, Mr. Speaker. But also within SCASPA, as I speak, the renovation at the ferry terminal continues. That ferry terminal, Mr. Speaker, was first constructed in 1996 or 1997, thereabout, Mr. Speaker. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was done to that ferry terminal for 20 years or more. 20 years and more, Mr. Speaker. They had no regard for the many passengers and the vessels that plied between St. Kitts and Nevis. In today's St. Kitts and Nevis, these ferry vessels are like jumping on the bus to St. Paul's. You should have seen those ferries moving on Monday and Tuesday. And the member from number 10 likes the ferries. That's all he uses. And we have to support them. And the board at Scasper, in its wisdom, thought it would be prudent to really ensure that passengers between St. Kitts and Nevis would wait for their ferries in an environment of comfort and safety. And so what we are doing, an upgrade to the facility is being undertaken at an estimated cost of some $250,000. Local contractors are on board. Some 28 workers are being employed. The size of that space would be somewhere in the region of 70 feet by 30 or 40 feet, 70 by 30 by 11. You travel on the ferry, Mr. Speaker, and you'll be in comfort, air conditioned. You'll have your own bathroom facilities. Someone suggests you put some coffee inside, but that's something one can ponder about, coffee and tea or water. The passenger capacity per peak hour period is somewhere in the region of 160 passengers per peak hour period. But we are saying, whether you're a tourist, a matter of fact, when tourists came in to St. Kitts, or even from Nevis to St. Kitts, or from London, for example, on a Saturday going to Nevis, the taxi drivers were so ashamed to put them out in those squalid conditions down there at the ferry terminal. And we said, no more. We said you must come down, alight your taxis, wait on your vessel in an environment of comfort and safety. Mr. Speaker, the terminal building at the Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw International Airport is also being upgraded. Mr. Speaker. Air conditioning of that facility in the airport check-in area and customs area is ongoing, almost completed. The first initiative, and that must make the supporters of Team Unity administration proud. When you go to the airport to check in, you don't have to walk with no rag like me, Mr. Speaker. You don't. You'll be in air-conditioned comfort. We are also considering the CUTE system, the common use terminal equipment for the check-in as well, to make it more efficient. And all this is being done in terms of air condition at the cost of some $540,000. The estimated overall cost of renovation of the check-in area is some easy $850,000. And the completion date is the end of August 2017. As I said, the customs area as well will be completed with brand new air-conditioned units, and all local contractors and our workers are on these projects. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking at the renovation of the West Bus Line terminal. And this area has already been adopted by Scasper. The Scasper board has allocated an amount of $100,000, and the estimated commencement date for this renovation of the West Bus Line terminal is September, and would be done over a 1-month period, September to October. So those who commute from Sandy Point and beyond to Basseterre and disembark those buses, you'll have better seating, you'll have a better housing in terms of your shade. You can disembark your buses if rain is coming. And even when you're waiting on your buses, when rain is falling. And I must commend the chairman, Don Boncampo, and members of the board, members like Terry Adams, Borkham, Winston Borkham, Hendrickson, Jimmy Pistano, Chris Roberts. These members understand the important role, the important corporate role that Casper ought to play, working hand in hand with the Team Unity administration and others whom I forgot, I did not mention as well, Al-Wali and the others, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to the issue of the Bastille High School, or the new Bastille High School, Mr. Speaker. In my capacity as Minister with responsibility for public infrastructure and the parliamentary representative for East Bastille, because this location is in the constituency that I have the honor to lead at this present time. And I refer to page 41 of our manifesto, which spoke to a new Bastille High School for the people in this country. And when we hear the scaremongering, when we hear the rumors from the other side and elsewhere, Mr. Speaker, we seem to have forgotten. We seem to have forgotten the sufferings and the hardships of teachers and students at that institution, my alma mater as well. We seem to have forgotten, Mr. Speaker, that for almost 3 years and more, the members opposite, while occupying the seat of government, had no solution, none, nada, for this problem at the Bastille High School. They introduced a shift system. Parents cried out. With children on the road, 7 and 8 o'clock in the night, at a shift system starting 7 in the morning. No answer they had, Mr. Speaker. They had students scattered all over the place. Some in Warner Park, in the pavilion. Some in the football pavilion. Some in the old Bastille Boys School and the old Bastille High School. They had no solution, no answer for the problems. Students, Mr. Speaker, teachers as well, were falling ill by the dozens, by the day. And what they did? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nada. People were fainting. People had skin rashes, skin disease. They had no solution. No solution they had, Mr. Speaker. The member from number 6, remember his famous words, "I'm a medical doctor. Nothing wrong with the school."
I remember.
I'm giving a historical perspective.
Well, for the comment, querying whether it's a statement by a minister. So I'm going to advise do not start to pinpoint blame on any particular member, because then it would then lead to controversy.
Mr. Speaker, I take your word, but it's not sensation, it's fact. It's not fiction. These are the words of the member and leader of the government. He said he was a medical doctor. Nothing is wrong with the school. He said that, Mr. Speaker.
Repeatedly.
Yes, he said it.
Who said something was wrong with the school? You.
You know, and this one may be controversial, so I won't use it. You know, this one I won't use, Mr. Speaker. But this is about the yes, yes, sir. So I won't talk about head no good minister, sir. I won't talk about that. I won't talk about the head no good former minister then, Mr. Speaker. You know, when he spoke about a pregnant woman didn't even have a mask on. Yes. But what we have done, Mr. Speaker, what have we done thus far as a responsible government? Because we all have children. We all have children. So what we did, we temporary housed students and committed to building a brand new high school. A brand new high school. And Mr. Speaker, why I was given that historical perspective, because we have to be able to separate the sensational from the factual. That's what I'm doing, Mr. Speaker. We went to try to procure modular units. The former principal, Ron Collins, and PWD engineer, chief engineer, George Gilbert, journeyed to the USA, came back and reported to the cabinet about their trip to the upstate Florida to negotiate procurement of modular units. And Mr. Speaker, when cabinet found out, or when they advised cabinet that the cost to bring these modular units from upstate Florida down to Miami and then to St. Kitts, the freight alone on these units to St. Kitts, including the inland haulage, was $3 or $4 million. $3 or $4 million, Mr. Speaker. We could not, as a responsible government, just take up the people's money and spend it like that. We brought in engineers, a former director, other engineers, Mr. Speaker, to advise us on the way forward with the new Bastia High School and a temporary school. And as a responsible administration, we recognize that this was an emergency, as there existed a threat to public health, a threat to the welfare and safety of students and teachers and ancillary workers. We recognize that, Mr. Speaker. And this, we also recognize, and the nation recognized, when we took it to the people on our campaign, that this was an emergency situation, and they felt best that if Labour failed for 3.5 years, give us the chance, and we will fix it within our term. And that is what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. We lease land in tailors. Until today, we are housing together over 95% of the student population in one temporary facility. That's a caring government, Mr. Speaker. A caring government. The Minister of Education and his entire cabinet ignored the students, ignored them. We established a technical or a steering committee called the St. Kitts Nevis Water Experts Working Group, Mr. Speaker, chaired by the Director of Public Works, Mr. Cromwell Henry, who is a civil engineer and a hydrogeologist. Cromwell Williams, beg your pardon. Beg your pardon, you're sharp. Thank you, AG. Chaired by the Director of Public Works, Cromwell Williams, who is a civil engineer and a hydrogeologist. On this committee, you had another engineer, an environmentalist, Dr. Halsey Haley, another civil engineer as well, and former water services manager, Mr. Alfred Rollins, who spent 20 years or more developing water in this country, and others inclusive of Nevis, or from Nevis. And Mr. Speaker, the group advised the cabinet of the location and the best location for this new Bassi High School. The group noted the mitigating factors. For example, the proposed site at Ponds Estate, Mr. Speaker, is located downstream of the well field, and groundwater flows towards the ocean. As such, the risk of contamination is mitigated. The group made recommendations to the cabinet, Mr. Speaker, inclusive of the monitoring and control of all wastewater streams generated by the school, including solid and liquid waste, and recommended as well that standard operating protocols for receiving, storage, and disposal of all chemicals are properly designed in case of spills, and also recommended, Mr. Speaker, the appropriate technology for wastewater collection and treatment at the site. Mr. Speaker, the overall issues of water resources development and protection in St. Kitts Nevis were considered. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we took seriously the recommendation that the feasibility study for centralized collection and treatment of wastewater for Bassity and Charlestown as a matter of urgency. And this should include an institutional and legislation review, or legislative review, and update to ensure there's the creation of a utility. But, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I want to implore all to separate the sensational from the factual. Separate the fiction from the facts. Because, Mr. Speaker, when I hear, for example, a former chairman of the Development Control and Planning Board making the rounds on talk radio, it saddens me, Mr. Speaker. It really saddens me. Because under his chairmanship, it is said to me, Mr. Speaker, because the chairman approved the construction, the chairman approved the construction of a house on the beach in Frigate Bay. And I commend Mr. Lindsey Grant, my colleague, the member from number 4. I commend the member from number 4 for securing monies from the Curriculum Development Fund, CDF, to improve the strip, because the same chairman of the DCP for almost 20 years, Mr. Speaker, turned a blind eye to dumping sewage and wastewater into the pond at Frigate Bay.
Total abuse. Refrain from going down that road. Because, statements like that appear to be controversial. I don't have any evidence before me, so I don't think you should go down that road. And
Mr. Speaker, I have information, and it's factual, that on the strip for all these years, sewage was dumped in the pond at Frigate Bay and in the sea at Frigate Bay. From the strips, the bars on the strip. And the member from number 6, from number 4, under the Curriculum Development Fund, is rectifying that. We are going to put the sewage from the strip on Frigate Bay into the lift station for the Marriott Hotel to dispose of the sewage. That's where the sewage went, Mr. Speaker, for 20 years under Labour. That cannot be disputed. I have those facts. But, Mr. Speaker, again, the issues of the designs. And I've heard it. The comments about the designs by this good gentleman I found to be premature. For his guidance and for the guidance of the nation, Mr. Speaker, they were the first and second concept, and the committee, I am advised by the chairman and director of public works, Mr. Cromwell Williams. I am advised, I have it here, Mr. Speaker, that on the third and final concept, the square footage of the school buildings would be finalized. So too, civil works, roads, sewage, etc. So it must be premature, Mr. Speaker, when they go on the radio. Up to yesterday, I've heard her, the member from number 2. It must be premature because discussions are still ongoing. Discussions are still ongoing with respect to the maximizing, the optimizing, and ensuring the effective and efficient use of that space over there at Ponds Estate. While ensuring as well, Mr. Speaker, that such space is most conducive to learning. Mr. Speaker, an environmental impact assessment will come after the design parameters are established. That's when the EIA will come, Mr. Speaker. I'm also advised that adequate redundancies will be put into place to deal with all eventualities. So finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to implore my people, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, do not be fooled about the scaremongering about the disposition of the Bastille Valley Wellfield. Mr. Speaker, I submit to this Honorable House and to this nation that the real threat, the already identified threat, came via the Water Resource and Management Plan, Volume 1 to be exact, which was delivered to the then minister. Some people call him the sleepy minister. He was, I take that back. I rescind that. The minister who just said, right, yes. But Mr. Speaker, that's what they said about him, you know. That's what they said about him.
Yes,
And this is what... Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Remember,
Yes, sir.
refrain from making such statements.
About speaking minister, sir? I won't, sir. Thank you, sir. The existing well field, this is what it says here. From an excerpt from the report. The existing well field is currently operating at capacity. Several of the wells produce less than 50 gallons per minute and should be abandoned as production wells. This is the advice he got. He never took it. Can't even say what he was doing. But the fact, it continues, Mr. Speaker, the fact that the well field is operating at capacity to meet the existing demands is resulting in the long-term mining of the groundwater from the Bastia Valley aquifer within the area of the existing well field. This mining of the groundwater is causing intrusion of saline waters into the aquifer from 3 different directions. That's the threat. Saltwater intrusion. Nothing about the Bastia High School, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we have done, and in closing, for the people of Bird Rock, Frigate Bay, the Southeast Peninsula, before us in the cabinet, actually dealt with that yesterday, Mr. Speaker, 3 options. I just speak to one option, Mr. Speaker, and that option which is at an immediate low cost, which would help to alleviate some of the woes we have in Bird Rock, for example, member from number 2, and in Frigate Bay, Senator, is to introduce, having had negotiations with the royal utilities to implement option 1 for an additional 200,000 gallons per day of potable water to augment the reduced supply in the Frigate Bay and Southeast Peninsula areas, which is still being precipitated by the extended dry spell. And for those in that particular area, Mr. Speaker, I want to continue to commend them. I want to commend them, Mr. Speaker, for their high level of tolerance in these difficult times. But I can assure them all that as a team unity administration and as your minister with responsibility for water, we are going to find solutions to these problems. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.